Hi everyone, I hope that you have your digital notebook open. If not, go ahead and pause the video and do that. And you'll want to go to the third slide, all about parts of an expression. That's what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to start applying some of the words we've been working on. So again, please pause the video if you don't have your digital notebook pulled up, because you're going to want to type and do a lot of things with your notes during this lesson. So go ahead and do that if you need to. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first off, in your notes, it says, what is an expression? So that is a mathematical phrase that contains numbers and operations. Very simple, right? And those numbers could be represented in a couple different ways that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But make sure you fill in those blanks of numbers and operations. That's what makes a mathematical phrase, okay, which is what an expression is. So let's take a look. So I'm going to show you a bunch of different things on this one, and I'll show you what I need you to do as you're going, okay? So for this first word, we've got something called a coefficient, okay? So I'm going to explain what that is, and then we'll show it what to do on our numbers here. So we've got an expression down here, and a coefficient is the number being multiplied to a variable. We'll talk about what variable is here in just a second. So it's the number that's being multiplied. So we're going to change that to green. Now I don't have that ability to do on mine, but what you can do is you can double click on your 8x plus 3 expression here, and if you highlight the 8, go ahead and change that to green. So what I'm going to do is just draw an arrow to show you that 8 is the coefficient, because the 8 next to this x, which we'll talk about the x in a moment, is being multiplied. When they're next to each other, that just means multiplication. So go ahead and change the 8 to green because it is the coefficient. But let's keep going on just a little bit. If you need to pause, feel free, but I want to talk about this next one, variable, because that goes along with the coefficient. Our definition for coefficient was the number being multiplied to a variable. Well, we got to know what a variable is then. So a variable is the unknown number represented by a letter. So it's a number we don't know, and we use a letter to represent it. So that's going to be x. So go ahead and change x to blue, because that is our variable. And so since 8x, this really means 8 times x. That's what that actually means. If there was just one x there, that would be 1. But then we would need, every time there's a number there, that's representing how many x's there are. So in this case, there's 8x. Well, instead of writing x out 8 times, we're just going to use a coefficient to represent that. So the coefficient is 8, so change that to green. And then the variable is the letter representing this unknown number. So go ahead and change that to blue, so you're coordinating it with our vocab words up here. Okay? The last one, and again, pause if you need to. The last one here is a constant. A constant is a number with no variable. So that would be this 3 here. So go ahead and change the 3 to red, because it's the constant. It's the one that has no variable with it. So coefficient and variable go hand in hand, and the word co means with, right? Like co-teacher or co-worker. Coefficient means it has to have something else, and that something else is the variable. So coefficient and variable always go together. They're being multiplied. Coefficient is the number, variable is the letter, and constant is by itself. It stands alone, so it is the number with no variable. So make sure you changed each part to look like the colors with the vocab words. There's 2 more words I want to talk about here. We've got the word term. The word term is the parts of the expression separated by addition and subtraction signs. Very important here. So if I look at my expression here, I see one addition sign. So what that means is that's what's separating our terms. So we've got 8x as a term, because that has multiplication. That's not separated. So 8x is one whole term. Then because of this addition sign, it's separating it from the 3, which is our second term. So how many terms are there? There are 2. There are 2 terms in this expression, okay? Because we use those addition and subtraction signs to separate the terms. The last vocab word here is factors, and those are the numbers being multiplied. So the factors in this particular expression would be 8 and x, because 8 and x are being multiplied. That's what it means to have coefficient variables. So coefficient variables are also factors because they're being multiplied. If you need to pause or go back and take a look at something, that's fine, but let's apply this. So I don't believe you have these next problems on your notebook. So the notebook was the notes part, but let's apply it here so you're just kind of following along using those notes to help. And feel free to rewind if you need to. But we want to know, what are the coefficients for this expression? Well, coefficient we learned was the number being multiplied to a variable. So let's look how many variables we have first. Well, variable is the letter in place of that unknown number. So I see that we have y and x as variables. So if we have two variables, that means we have to have two coefficients as well. So you just look and see, well, how many of that variable do you have? Because that's what the coefficient would be. So because there's 3 y's, 3 would be a coefficient. But I don't see a number in front of x. Well, in order for x to exist, there has to be at least one of it. So really, you could think of this as 1x. So the coefficients would be 3 for y and 1 for x. So those are our two coefficients. That's what we would say is 3 and 1. 3y, 1x. 9 is not a coefficient because there's no variable, so that's a constant. Okay? Let's look at one more example here. So here's another expression, and we're going to list what the particular part of the expression, all the names of it. So if I look at 3, I notice that 3 is being multiplied to x. So that means that 3 must be a coefficient. Okay? But I also know that because it's being multiplied, anything that you multiply together is also a factor. So it is both of those words, coefficient and factor. Coefficient because it's being multiplied to a variable, factor because it's something being multiplied. So then x would be a variable because a variable is a number, a letter representing an unknown number. But we already talked about that coefficient and variables are being multiplied together, so that means it's also a factor too, just like the coefficient was for 3. So 3 and x are both being multiplied. Remember, when it's next to each other, it's being multiplied, so they're factors. 3 is the coefficient, x is the variable. But 17 is not a coefficient, not a factor, not a variable, because it's not being multiplied, it's being subtracted. So it is a constant, but it actually has one more name. So remember, things that are separated by an addition or subtraction sign are terms. So 17 is also a term. Now 3 and x were not terms. If I put them together, it's a term, right? 3x would be the term, and 17 is a term because it's separated by that subtraction sign. So this would have two terms. But the term would be 17. 3 and x by themselves are not terms, they're parts of a term. Okay? So feel free to go back and take a look at something, but otherwise you have some parts of an expression practice. Feel free to use these notes to help you. That is posted on Google Classroom along with this video, and then please make sure you're still getting your extra math done too. So you've got practice and extra math. Good luck. Feel free to ask for help if you need any.